Hello everyone, this is Kenny Quayle from the Maricopa Monitor in Pinal Central. In the past couple of weeks, the city of Maricopa has been rocked by a series of shootings. 5 have occurred, and although there have been no deaths, there's been property damage and, unfortunately, one life-changing injury. Understandably, these horrible instances have upset many of Maricopa's citizens, and they have taken to Facebook in droves to express their feelings about Maricopa, its growth, crime, and the shootings, many of which have valid points. The problem is that others have taken to blaming apartments and low-income housing, referring to Maricopa as ghetto and using language that is, at best, racially charged, and at worst, outright racist. Not to mention classist. I sat down with City of Maricopa Police Chief Mark Goodman to speak about the shootings and the circumstances surrounding them to better understand what is happening in Maricopa with regards to crime, what factors contribute to it, and what caused these shootings. Through this, we were able to debunk many of the offending statements on social media and get closer to the truth of what is happening to the city.
So over the past 6 to 7 days, we've had 4 or 5 different shooting incidents here in the city of Maricopa. They have all involved individuals who are known to one another, and the individuals involved in those incidents took personal disagreements and took them to the point where they escalated to gunfire between these known parties. In a majority of the shootings, there were no injuries. There was some damage to property. Unfortunately, one of these shootings resulted in injury to a victim that will likely change the course of that person's life for the rest of their life, and that's very unfortunate.
Goodman spoke further about the incidents, classifying all of them as occurring in residential neighborhoods throughout the community, even going so far as to pull up a map to consult, and factoring in the shootings that occurred nearby but out of the Maricopa Police Department's jurisdiction. Goodman did decline to comment on those incidents outside of his jurisdiction, even if one or both of the parties involved came from Maricopa, as it is not under his purview.
Yep, so it looks like we've had one in the north end of Rancho El Dorado. Looks like we've had some near John Wayne Parkway and so the residential areas there. And then most recently, the shootings were out on the east side of town. One was in Rancho Mirage, and I think a couple were in Tortosa. So just generally speaking, in different geographical areas, the commonality is they're all residential neighborhoods, but there's no particular neighborhood. There's, not every neighborhood, but several different neighborhoods were impacted.
Goodman even went on to confirm that no purposeful shootings took place anywhere near an apartment or so-called low-income housing, with the only incident on record being an accidental firearm discharge resulting in an injury, an incident that Goodman classifies as bad gun handling and irresponsible gun ownership rather than any sort of criminal incident. Beyond the location, the interpersonal relationships of those involved in the shootings is also of concern. According to Goodman, all the shooters and victims were known to one another. He broke the situation down even further as well.
Go back to May 5th. We had somebody who discharged a firearm in a backyard. There were no injuries in that incident. On May 10th, we had a shooting involving a man who did a drive-by shooting on his former friend's place of residence. There was some property damage associated with that incident. There was a shooting in a driveway of a Rancho El Dorado residence. No injuries tied to that one. There was a shooting that occurred between 2 neighbors on May 14th. No injuries on that one. And then on May 15th, there was a shooting in Rancho Mirage that did involve the serious injury of a family member related to the suspect.
These shootings, all of which occurred in neighborhoods and between either friends or family, have a very different implication than a random mugging or other act of violence between strangers.
Yeah, they're not random acts of violence, if that's what you're getting at. These are incidents that are all interpersonal, as you mentioned, and they all escalated from arguments or long-standing disagreements that came to a head and ended in gunfire, which is unacceptable, and it's an inappropriate way to settle personal disputes.
These incidents seem to be just that, childish escalations of arguments into life-altering violence. Chief Goodman even had something to say directly to those asserting that low-income housing and apartments are the reason behind this perceived rise in crime.
I'd say there's no factual basis for those assertions on these particular incidents. And I would add that last year in 2024, that less than 2% of our calls for service came from apartments or multifamily housing.
But then that begs the question, just why are we seeing this rash of shootings in Maricopa? Chief Goodman thinks he may have the explanation for that as well.
For some reason, people are turning to firearms to settle their personal disputes. I don't know. It shows a lack of maturity regarding the way that people are choosing to settle disputes. It shows a lack of civility. It shows an unfortunate lack of civility between people in our community. And, I don't want to speak too broadly, but, one just has to turn on the evening news to see how incivility has spread, throughout our society at large and throughout our nation. It's unfortunate, but I think that Maricopa is not the only place in the United States that's experiencing, these types of violent acts happening between people, and when these acts are preventable, and frankly, it's unacceptable that people decide to pick up a firearm to settle personal disputes.
Next, the chief and I delved into the hard numbers and data surrounding these incidents and the larger trends in crime around Maricopa. The MPD tracks their crimes per capita as an easy way to understand their crime statistics and keep tabs on them, with them drilling down the more specific statistics as well to understand the intricacies of crime in the city. According to those numbers, crime is down 23% this year so far, with the month of April seeing a 27% reduction in assaults, most of which are domestic violence related. There were also 0 homicides last year, a 7% decrease in sex offenses, and 2 robberies as opposed to 1 the previous year, all making for a strong showing for Goodman and the MPD.
A vast majority of our assaults in the city of Maricopa are between people who are known to one another. Typically, these assault numbers are representative of our domestic violence incidents or disputes or fights between acquaintances or family members. I would say that I don't know of any incidents that involve an assault where the victim doesn't know the suspect. That is a very, very rare occurrence here in the city of Maricopa.
When asked whether or not he thinks the prevalence of stories about violent crime on social media and in the public consciousness is simply a case of confirmation bias rather than a representation of a changing Maricopa, Goodman had this to say.
I think it's just human nature. We read about the incidents, happening very close to one another, and then it's really easy to come to the conclusion that, crime is on the rise. You combine that with our growth in population, and it's easy to make a correlation. And anecdotally speaking, I think that's a rather easy conclusion for people to make. But then when we start looking at the data and we start looking at the facts, the facts and the data don't line up, with our anecdotal assumptions. They don't always line up with our anecdotal assumptions.
Even considering the hard data, it is understandable for people to be concerned about these incidents, especially those who have lived in Maricopa since the early days. There are certainly valid concerns that, based upon the city's rapid growth in population, there would be a rise in crime. This concern has already been noted by Goodman, and he and the MPD have already looked into those numbers that would prove this trend, should it be occurring, and found nothing to indicate a rise in crime.
If you look at the numbers versus our population growth in Maricopa, we're growing at about 6 to 7% per year, but our crime is not growing commensurate with that population increase. In fact, over the last 2 years, we've had a decrease in crimes per capita. So clearly, we're doing something right. And it's not just the police department, it's our community as well. For the people that were involved in these incidents, hurting one another through gunfire, those are really outliers in our community. Our community is one that values safety, and we have a great relationship with our community, and they do not hesitate to pick up the phone and call us about things of concern. And our low crime rate is a reflection of that. So I would expect, if our numbers keep trending in this direction, I don't see an issue with our population growth. I won't be concerned about it until the numbers start to diverge closer to one another. Certainly something to keep an eye on, but right now it looks like we're doing very well.
The next question to address is what Maricopa citizens can do to prevent this sort of violence and keep themselves safe, as well as what the MPD is doing to keep the citizens safe from gun violence.
First of all, I'd like to say that Maricopa is a safe city. You know, we don't have assaults are not running rampant. You know, people have a high level of a feeling of safety in Maricopa. And to those who would pick up a firearm or pick up a weapon to settle a dispute with a friend or a family member, I would say, let's turn towards our resources that we have here in the city. We have social service resources, we have school resources, we have resources for mental health, we have resources for veteran services, we have resources through the police department, we have resources for teenagers. We have a lot of people here in Maricopa who are concerned enough to provide those resources and to make this a safe community. So please, I urge our community members to take advantage of those things, even if it's just calling the police. If people are getting angry enough to the point where they're thinking about assaulting a family member or a friend because of a dispute, I encourage them to call the police. Please pick up the phone, call us, and we will come and help mitigate the issue to the best of our ability, because we do not want violence occurring in our community. I want people to be responsible with firearms. I have long been an advocate of responsible gun ownership, and picking up firearms to settle family disputes or disputes between friends is not acceptable to me, and it's not acceptable to our community. And people who engage in this behavior, we will catch you, and you will be prosecuted to the extent that the law allows. So please know that, but also please know that we care about you and we want you to resolve your conflicts without violence. So please exercise the resources that are available to you.
Goodman also emphasized the importance of education to public safety. He believes that encouraging people to think twice about what they're doing and to properly utilize the resources available to them is key to preventing further violence.
Yeah, obviously if there's an emergency, please call 911, and we will respond out. If you need to remain anonymous, you absolutely can. You know, we will respect that. But call us. We're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We exist to serve this community, and we want to be there for our residents. So please call us, and we will come out and or put you in touch with somebody that can help.
Anyone interested in reaching out to Chief Goodman directly with comments, questions, concerns, or even simply anything to bring to the attention of the police department can do so at 520-316-6909 or at markgoodman@maricopa-az.gov, with Goodman promising to either answer inquiries directly or to forward them to the appropriate member of his command staff. This has been Kenny Quayle with the Maricopa Monitor and Pinal Central, signing off.